Welcome back to Battles of the American Civil War. We are moving on to August of 1861. Things are starting to pick up big time here as both sides have, I think, finally settled in and realized this is only 4 months into the war, and I think we got about 4 more years to go. But guys,
they don't know how long.
I think they were thinking 4 years, 1865. August. I don't even know. When is it? April of 1865? Somewhere around there. We just covered like 4 battles last episode. This episode, we got another 4 battles. We're going to do the Battle of Charleston, the Battle of Kesslers Cross Lanes, the battles Hatteras Inlet Batteries, and the Battle of Dry Wood Creek. One of these is
Dry Wood Creek. And must not be very a hell of a creek there.
Well, maybe some of the wood that's in it sticking up over the water, so it's always dry.
Right.
I believe the Hatteras Inlet Battery is a naval battle as well, so you can have a little bit of naval action.
Some more misfiring of the cannons on the boat.
Yeah. We're all in Missouri, Virginia, and North Carolina. I don't think we've been in North Carolina yet, have we?
No.
Yeah, Missouri and Virginia continuing to see the heaviest battles. I think that's the whole war, right?
Pennsylvania and Tennessee, Kentucky get a couple battles there, but mostly, they stay close to home.
It's probably only going to be like a 30-minute episode. None of these are, we don't have another A battle, Class A major battle until 1862 rest. I think we got maybe 1 or 2 more Bs, but the rest of this year is going to be D's and C's and little skirmishes. So,
whatever, man.
First up, Battle of Charleston, August 19th, 1861. We got the Union Army led by, we got the 11th and 22nd Illinois Infantry, 250 men led by Colonel Henry Doherty. And then Missouri State Guard, these guys putting in work.
Yep.
Their cavalry, 500 men over there, led by Colonel J.H. Hunter. And, August 19th, 1861, Colonel Doherty commanding the 22nd Illinois Infantry and Lieutenant Colonel Ransom of the 11th Illinois, which was stationed at Bird's Point, took 250 men and went by train to Charleston, where a force of Confederate infantry and cavalry belonging to the Missouri State troops was stationed. When near the city, the troops were divided into 2 parties, one commanded by Doherty and the other by Colonel Hart.
Right.
And about 100 yards from the public square, the cavalry, numbering about 200, was drawn up to halt the progress of the Federals. So we're in the town square here, huh? Not even in woods or field or nothing, huh?
Right. It's going right in there, huh?
Charleston, Missouri. How big is that?
Charleston? Probably a decent little town, no?
5,000 people, yeah. So
decent.
Probably even less then.
Yeah.
It's only 4 square miles area. It's not very big.
No. All right.
Yeah, so we got 100. So the Confederates only sent out 200 guys to these 250. Are they going to use the other 300?
One volley drove them into a cornfield. Doherty then ordered the men forward at the double quick to the public square.
At the double quick. He was like, I want you guys to go forward doubly quick.
To the square, where the main body of infantry was encountered. The enemy took shelter behind the houses and poured a heavy fire onto the Union troops. In the meantime, the cavalry had been rallied and attacked by Hart. No, they attacked Hart,
right,
who faced his men both ways and succeeded in dispersing them. Colonel J.H. Hunter, commanding the Confederates, then retreated and was afterward placed under arrest. So I think these guys were like nowhere near ready to do anything.
Well, apparently not. They got ran away by a force less than half their size.
Right, and most of the Confederates were cavalry, so they had horses.
Right. Captain R.D. Nolan, along with 50 men of the Centralia Cavalry, advanced upon Charleston, passed through the streets without any resistance, and captured 2 rebels, who informed the captain that the forces under Colonel Doherty had preceded them and engaged the enemy. They also informed the captain that there was an encampment of mounted rebels at a point near or upon what is called Fish Lake, 5 miles east of Charleston and about 2.5 miles north of the railroad. Taking one of the captured men for a guide, Nolan took up the line of march in the direction indicated. So he was like, all right, show me where these little mother effers are at.
All right, let's go check them out. If they're there, you live. If they're not, you die. Nolan came upon the enemy's camp, which was situated in a dense wood which surrounded an open space of some 8 acres. Hey, that's huge. It's a hell of a battlefield. 8 acres?
Yeah.
Day was just breaking, and Nolan's men fired some 40 shots, and the enemy replied. The rebels then laid down their arms and surrendered.
So Fire back. All right, we're done.
A lot of ammo.
All right.
Noman's men took 33 prisoners, captured 38 horses, took possession of about the same number of rifles and shotguns. I hope so. Together with countermeasures and ammunition. So they got all kinds of good stuff.
Taking some weapons.
Right.
Colonel Hunter, like we just mentioned, was placed under arrest by Brigadier General M. Jeff Thompson, who was commanding Missouri State Guard. Thompson, in his report, stated if Colonel Hunter had advanced only far enough to march back to his camp after driving in their pickets, the object and order would have been accomplished, but he reached Charleston at 10 a.m., remained there all day and night within a few hours' march of an overwhelming force. So he could have went back
right
instead of staying in Charleston, and he would never been overran, and they could have regrouped with a bigger squad and came and got these guys.
Right. The Battle of Kesslers Cross Lanes, also known as the Battle of Cross Lanes, took place August 26, 1861, Nicholas County, Virginia, now West Virginia, as part of the Western Virginia Campaign during the American Civil War.
Sir.
So we get our a Western Virginia one here. Huh? Some little freaking hillbillies going on. The United States commanders, Erastus Tyler. They had 1,000 men, approximately. Confederate States of America, their commander, John B. Floyd. He had 2,000 men. So here we are again. Confederates double in the Union. We're in West Virginia, so it's got to be like mountainous, right? Hell of a terrain.
West Virginia, yeah. I mean, that terrain don't look friendly. It looks pretty bumpy to me.
Does.
August 26th, Brigadier General John B. Floyd, commanding Confederate forces in Kanawha Valley, crossed the Gauley River to attack he's a colonel, Erastus Tyler, 7th Ohio Infantry Regiment, encamped at Kesslers Cross Lanes. The Union forces were surprised and routed, and the regiment was defeated with severe loss.
Usually how it goes, man.
Mm-hmm. The two wings of Tyler's line retreated in opposite directions.
Oh, no.
Throughout the rout and carnage, Major Jack Casement, at the head of Tyler's left wing, commenced a retrograde march to the Confederate territory over mountain ranges to the Elk River and what is now the town of Clendenin, and then on to Charleston, West Virginia, without the capture of a man. What's up with Charleston? That whole area has got Charleston.
Right.
Floyd then withdrew to the river and took up a defensive position at Carnifex Ferry, which will be coming up probably next episode. During the month, General Robert E. Lee arrived in West Virginia and attempted to coordinate the forces of Brigadier Generals Floyd Henry A. Wise, Colonel Douglas Micklich, and William W. Loring. So that was literally the battle. They came in there and routed them. It was like, bye.
Right.
We're taking over this.
Well, they needed that, I think. Because that brought Robert E. Lee in. Robert E. Lee.
Robert E. Lee.
Robert E. Lee. And he did a smart thing. It was like, you guess what? Let's work together. Let's get this together.
Let's work together.
Yeah, so, I mean, you catch them off guard. 1,000 significant casualties, though, so that's what it said, right? Severe loss. It said severe loss.
U.S. lost 15 killed, 20 wounded, 38 captured. Confederates had 40 killed. I don't know if that's significant losses for the Union, but I guess 20 wounded, 38 captured.
That's a lot of losses for the Confederate. 40 dead? Jeez. Yeah, but the 38 captured and 20 wounded, that's
8% of your force gone.
At least.
There we go. All right, we get a first.
A first, the Battle of Hatteras.
Hatteras.
The Battle of Hatteras Inlet Batteries, August 28th and 29th, 1861, was the first combined operation of the Union Army and the Navy working together.
This is the first time they have worked together, and I believe the Confederates actually get in on some naval action. They haven't really yet.
Nice.
So,
the North Carolina Sounds occupy most of the coast from Cape Lookout, that's in North Carolina, to the Virginia border, with their eastern borders marked by the Outer Banks. They were almost ideally located for raiding northern maritime commerce. Cape Hatteras, the easternmost point in the Confederacy, is within sight of the Gulf Stream, which moves at a speed of about 3 knots. All right, moves about 3 knots. Ships in the Caribbean trade would reduce the time of their homeward journeys to New York, Philadelphia, or Boston. By riding the stream to the north, raiders, either privateers or state-owned vessels, could lie inside, protected from both the weather and from Yankee blockaders, until an undefended victim appeared. Watchers stationed at the Hatteras lighthouse would then signal a raider, which would dash out and make a capture. Nice. Off to being able to return the very same day. Sweet.
Damn, imagine who figured out all these
Little hiding spots in
Not only that, like streams in the ocean. Like, hey, man, you go to this latitude and you hit this stream, you don't got to do nothing. It'll take you wherever the hell you need to go.
Right, take it straight north and south.
Well, to protect the raiders from the federal reprisal, the state of North Carolina immediately after seceding from the Union established forts at the inlet. I would assume so. Waterways that allowed entrance to... In 1861, only 4 inlets were deep enough for ocean-going vessels to pass.
Right.
Beaufort, Ocracoke, Hatteras, and Oregon inlets. Hatteras Inlet was the most important of these, so it was given 2 forts named Fort Hatteras and Fort Clark.
Okay.
Fort Hatteras was sited adjacent to the inlet on the sound side of the Hatteras Island. Fort Clark was about a half a mile to the southeast, closer to the Atlantic Ocean.
Makes sense.
The forts were not very strong, though.
Oh, no.
Fort Hatteras only had 10 guns mounted by the end of August, with another 5 in the fort, but not mounted.
Oh, jeez.
Fort Clark only had 5. Furthermore, most of the guns were rather light 32-pounders or smaller, of limited range and inadequate for coastal defense.
No.
Hey, guys, we're going to build these for coastal defense, so let's put these guns that are inadequate for coastal defense.
We're going to put 2 worthless forts on this very important port. We'll see what happens.
What are you going to mean? Maybe they'll get close enough.
Well, it wasn't nothing about the defense. The personnel problem was even worse. North Carolina had raised and equipped 22 infantry regiments to serve in the war, but 16 of these had been drawn off for campaigns in Virginia.
I mean, you got to do what you got to do.
Right. The 6 regiments remaining were responsible for the defense of the entire North Carolina coastline.
Yeah, that's problematic.
Only a fraction of one regiment, the 7th North Carolina Volunteers, occupied the 2 forts at Hatteras Inlet. Jeez, O.P. A fraction. The other forts were likewise only weakly held. Fewer than 1,000 men garrisoned forts around Ocracoke, Hatteras, Clark, and Oregon. Jeez. Reinforcements, if needed, would have to come from far away in Beaufort.
Strangely, the military authorities in North Carolina did little to keep the poor state of their defenses secret.
Strangely,
several Yankee captains, victims of either capture or shipwreck, were loosely detained at or near Hatteras Island while waiting to return to their homes.
Loosely detained.
Their cuffs were not as tight. They were allowed virtually free access to the forts and made mental notes of everything.
Of course they did.
When they returned to the north, at least 2 of them gave full and valued descriptions to the Navy Department. Yeah, okay, guys.
Who let them leave?
I don't think they really held prisoners of war for that long. They just captured them, got everything they needed from them, and left.
Roll it out, boys.
Get the hell out of here.
Wow. The depredations on northern commerce emanating from Hatteras Inlet could not pass unnoticed. Insurance underwriters pressured Union Secretary of the Navy. Insurance underwriters pressured Union Secretary of the Navy Gideon Wells for a remedy.
What do we do?
Right. Wells needed no prodding. He already had on his desk a report from the Blockade Strategy Board suggesting a way to perfect the blockade of the North Carolina coast. He goes, don't worry. Got you covered. Check that out. The board recommended that the coast be rendered useless to the south by sinking old, useless, ballast-laden ships in the inlets to block them.
Oh, smart.
That is smart.
It's like a little blockade, obviously.
Right.
Soon after he received the board's report, Secretary Wells began to implement its recommendation. He ordered Commander H.S. Stellwagen to go to the Chesapeake Bay to buy some suitable old hawks. At the same time, he was told to report his activities to Flag Officer Silas H. Stringham, commandant of the Atlantic Blockading Squadron. These guys... What do you do? I'm the Atlantic Blockading Squadron Commander. As such, he was the naval officer in charge of the blockade of the North Carolina coast. This was the first involvement of Stringham with what was to become the attack at Hatteras Inlet.
Oh, okay. Well, in time, he would become the most important person in the expedition.
Okay.
Stringham opposed the plan to block the inlets from the beginning.
Oh, why?
He believed that the tidal currents would either sweep the impediments away or would rapidly scour new channels. Right.
Oh, right. Drag the ships down, and yeah.
It's like they don't realize how powerful the ocean is. As he saw it, the rebels could not be denied access to the sounds unless the inlets were actually held by the Union.
Makes sense.
In other words, in order to establish an effective blockade in this part of North Carolina, the forts that the state had set up would have to be captured. Since the Navy could not do it alone, the cooperation of the Army would be needed.
Well, as it happened, the Army was willing to cooperate. I would assume so, dude. You guys are the same.
I mean, we're in a war, guys.
I mean, kind of got to operate to work together there, pals. Its willingness had something to do with political General Benjamin F. Butler, who was political force that had to be dealt with, but was already emergent as militarily incompetent.
Yeah.
Butler was ordered to assemble a force of some 800 men for the expedition. He soon had 880. He said, you want 800? I got 80 more. 500 from the German-speaking 20th New York Volunteers, 220 from the 9th New York Volunteers, 100 from the Union Coast Guard, which was an Army unit, actually the 99th New York Volunteers.
Okay.
The U.S. Coast Guard, as we know it, did not exist in 1861.
Nope.
Well, I mean, they're still guarding the coast, though.
Right.
And 20 Army regulars from the 2nd U.S. Artillery. The men were put aboard 2 of the vessels that Commander Stellwagen had purchased, Adelaide and George Peabody. When objection was made that the 2 ships would not be able to survive a Hatteras storm, Stellwagen pointed out that the expedition could proceed only in fair weather anyway, as a storm would prevent landings.
Right.
I mean, right, who wants to land in blown off course and maybe hit some rocky coastlines or something?
Yeah, you're done, man. Ain't no sense of even risking it. While Butler was gathering his forces, Flag Officer Stringham was also making preparations. Somehow he learned that the War Department orders to Butler's superior, Major General John E. Wool, had contained the statement. The expedition ordinated in the Navy Department and is under its control.
Oh, so now he's going to be like, no.
Yep. This is the Navy's job here. Well, I mean, guess, right? Reason
he is the Navy, right?
Right. And he's telling that to Stringham.
Well, no, that was to Butler.
Right.
Butler's the Army guy.
Yeah. Reasoning that he would be blamed if anything went wrong, he decided to follow his own plans. He selected 7 warships for the expedition: USS Minnesota, Cumberland, Susquehanna, Wabash, Pawnee, Monticello, and Harriet Lane. All but the last were ships of the United States Navy. Harriet Lane was a revenue cutter, part of the United States Revenue Cutter Service. He also included his force, the armed steam Tug Fanny. All right, a little tugboat in there. Needed to tow some of the surf boats that would be used for the landing. Right. Yeah, gotta have a tugboat, right?
So they wanted the Army's cooperation, but then when the Army cooperates, this guy's like, well, you know what? The plan that we got put forward, I'm going to ignore it and do my own thing.
Right.
Well, we can kind of see where this battle's going already. On the 26th of August, the flotilla, Susquehanna and Cumberland, departed Hampton Roads and moved down the coast into the vicinity of Cape Hatteras. On the way, they were joined by the Cumberland. On August 26th, the flotilla, minus Susquehanna and Cumberland, departed Hampton Roads and moved down the coast of the vicinity of Cape Hatteras. On the way, they were joined by Cumberland. They swung around the Cape on the 27th of August and anchored near the inlet in full view of the defenders there. So they know that they're there now. Colonel William F. Martin of the 7th North Carolina Infantry, commanded at Forts Hatteras and Clark, knew that his 580 or so men would need help, so he called for reinforcements from Forts Ocracoke and Oregon.
Okay.
Unfortunately for him and his garrison, communication among the forts was slow, and the first reinforcements did not arrive until late the next day when it was too late.
Oh, jeez, dude. That's some crazy shit.
We got the Union Department of Virginia, Major General Benjamin F. Butler, with his 9th New York Infantry Regiment, the 20th New York Infantry, 99th New York Volunteer Infantry, which was the Union Coast Guard,
right.
Detachment, 2nd U.S. Artillery Regiment, detachments of sailors and Marines from the Fleet Atlantic Blockading Squadron, with these ships we've already named.
Mm-hmm.
And the Confederates, meanwhile, only have the 17th North Carolina Infantry Regiment, the Fort Hatteras Garrison, and unspecified naval volunteers, including Flag Officer Samuel Barron.
Wow.
Yeah. But they're outmatched by 1,000 people. 935 for the Union, 900 men for Confederates, but the Union do have 7 warships with them.
Right. Yes. Early August 28th, 1861, early morning. USS Minnesota, USS Wabash, and USS Cumberland began to bombard Fort Clark, while the lighter warships accompanied the transports to a point about 3 miles to the east, where the troops had began disembarking.
Is this the first land, what do they call that? When you're taking ships in the land and the soldiers are coming off of them? What do they call that? It's a thing.
I know what it is. It's a disembark.
Like they did in D-Day.
Disembark.
No, disembark means leave.
Yes, that's what they're doing. Their ship.
Is this the first thing to what the fuck is it? Storming a beach, I guess.
Whatever.
Storming a coastline, storming a shore.
Right. Stringham kept his ships moving in a loop with Wabash towing Cumberland. About 11 a.m., USS Susquehanna made her number and joined in.
She's like, you know what? I think it's time.
Right.
It's time.
Right. It's Sequina time. The ships would deliver their broadsides against the fort, move back out of range to reload, and then come back into a fire.
Smart stuff. By remaining in motion, they did not let the artillerymen in the fort correct their aim between shots and thereby negated much of the traditional advantage of shore-based guns over those ships. This tactic had been used previously by the British and French at the siege of Sevastopol in the Crimean War. British and French, huh?
Nice.
But this was the first time it was used by the U.S. Navy. I would assume so.
Right.
The return fire from Fort Clark was ineffective, either falling short or passing overhead, and no hits were made on the bombarding ships. Shortly after noon, the defenders ran low on ammunition, and about 12:25 p.m., they ran out completely.
Oh, jeez.
At this point, they abandoned the fort, some fleeing to Fort Hatteras, while others took to boats.
Okay, so that's Fort Clark. They needed to get that one out.
Yeah, well, that was the lesser manned one. Hatteras is the one with the has what they say 20 guns on it. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, however many people are left from the other fort. Colonel Max Weber, commanding the federal troops already on shore, noted this and put some men in take. Oh, okay, yeah. So Colonel Max Weber was on the shore and noticed that the fort was
Empty.
So he's like,
Get in there,
boys. It's ours. Plant that flag. But the fleet did not know this and continued firing for another 5 minutes.
Why couldn't they just raise a flag real quick? Like, dude, we got it.
All right. It was during this interval of confusion that the landing force suffered its only casualty. One of the soldiers being seriously wounded in the hand by a shell fragment. Jeez. Unavoidable. Totally avoidable. Fortunately, though, some of the troops were able to get to attention. Oh, come on.
They were able to get the attention.
Fortunately, some of the troops were able to get the attention of the gunners on the ships by waving a large American flag. Like, hey, you stupid bastards!
You idiots, is us!
Come on! What are you doing? And the bombardment stopped with no further harm done. Stringham and his captains then turned their attention to Fort
The big
Hatteras.
guy. Well, meanwhile, the landings were not going very well over at the 3 miles down the coastline. Only about a third of the troops were ashore when the rising winds produced surf that swamped and overturned the landing boats, and General Butler had to suspend further attempts to land. Colonel Weber found that he only had 318 men with him. The number included 102 from his own regiment, the 20th New York, but also 68 from the 9th New York, 28 from the Union Coast Guard, 45 artillerymen, 45 Marines, and 28 sailors who could man heavy guns. With several field pieces that they had managed to wrestle ashore through the surf, they could reasonably well defend themselves against a Confederate counterattack, but they were too weak to mount an attack on Fort Hatteras itself. Yeah, you guys need to get some more people in.
Well, Stringham kept his ships moving just as he did at Fort Clark not too long ago. The defenders tried to conserve their ammunition by firing only sporadically, so Stringham thought that perhaps the fort had been abandoned. No flag was flying. Before the battle, the old flag had been reduced to tatters and was never replaced.
Oh, that's not good.
So he's like, usually you got to throw that flag up instantly. He sent Monticello into the inlet to sound it out.
Oh, no.
But then the fort came to life once again. The ship grounded while trying to extricate herself. And in this condition, she was struck by 5 shots.
The Monticello, isn't that the big one too?
Things decent size. None of these did any permanent damage, though. Although several sailors received minor wounds. As the day come to a close, the fleet drew off in the face of the threatening weather. The exhausted defenders looked for reinforcements, and the federal troops ashore went to sleep supperless, with water running low and dreading the reinforcements that their opponents hoped for.
Right. Why don't you get your own reinforcements?
You tell me the guys on ground couldn't attack while the ships... Well, I guess that's kind of dangerous.
Can't be doing that.
No.
Sometime after dark, reinforcements began to arrive at the fort. The gunboat CSS Warren Winslow brought in some of the garrison from Fort Ocracoke, and some of the sailors also stayed to help man the guns. This brought the number of men in the fort up to more than 700, with more expected from New Bern. Accompanying the additional troops was Flag Officer Samuel Barron, commanding the coast defense of North Carolina and Virginia. Colonel Martin, pleading exhaustion, requested Barron to assume command.
Please.
Please, man. I got to get some sleep and stuff, man. He did so, still believing that with the additional troops from New Bern, they would be able to retake Fort Clark.
Retake Fort Clark? Okay.
So they're not only aimed at defending Hatteras, they're going back for Fort Clark.
No, we got to get that. We can't let them have that. Dawn of the second day blasted the hopes of the defenders. The weather moderated enough that the Union fleet could return and resume its bombardment. They were also able to drive off the transport, bring in reinforcements. Oh, no. Somehow a ship was able to get in, but rather than bringing in more troops, she carried away some of the wounded.
But, hey, man, I'm just here to get my guys out. Hey, man.
The fleet initially kept in motion, but they soon found that they were out of range of the guns in the fort. After that, the ships did not alter their positions, but poured their fire into the fort with no danger of reply.
Shit. So now they're just boom, 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 boom. There was nothing the men in the forts could do except endure the pain. After about 3 hours, Barron called a council of the officers, and they decided to seek terms, even though casualties had been quite light.
Right.
The actual numbers of dead and wounded are known only very imprecisely, as with pretty much every battle we've seen so far.
Right.
Various reports give the number of dead as from 4 to 7 and the wounded as from 20 to 45. A little after 11 a.m., the white flag was shown. Butler insisted upon surrender, which Barron agreed to. The battle came to a close, and the survivors went into the prisoner of war camps. The list of prisoners had 691 names, including those wounded but not evacuated. I guess you don't want those guys going back to the Confederates and fighting for them, but now you got an extra 691 mouths to feed.
Right.
And how many? I mean, it's happening all throughout the war. You're taking in how many guys? I mean,
that's a significant amount.
Yeah.
Holy shit. 691.
You might as well just keep them at the fort.
Right.
Like, you guys just stay here, I guess. Well, I don't know.
Didn't you hear? You got traded.
Right. Well, these uniforms on.
Jeez. Butler and Stringham left immediately after the battle. They didn't need to be there anymore. The former to Washington and the latter accompanying the prisoners to New York.
Okay.
Critics argue that each was trying to gather credit for themselves.
I know they were racing as fast as they could to get back to either Washington or New York.
Well, whoever's going to Washington is getting there first, so I'd rather be Butler. The pair contended, however, that they were trying to persuade the administration to abandon the original plan to block up Hatteras Inlet. In federal hands, it was no longer useful to the Confederacy, and in fact, now allowed Union forces to pursue raiders in the Sound. So, I mean, it worked out great. Although they and their supporters continued to press the case for several weeks, it seems to be unnecessary. They just wanted to block off that thing for some reason. I don't even think they want to man it. That's the problem.
Good for them. The War and Navy departments had already decided to retain possession of the inlet.
Oh, look at that.
Which would be used as the entry point of an amphibious expedition against the North Carolina mainland early the next year. Well, no shit.
Right.
This campaign, known as Burnside's North Carolina Expedition for its senior Army commander, Ambrose E. Burnside,
Sweet.
completely removed the Sounds as a source of commerce raiding activity. Good for that.
I guarantee you ain't nobody getting none of the forts.
Continued federal possession of Hatteras Inlet was considerably aided by Confederate authorities who early decided that the Ocracoke and Oregon batteries were indefensible, so they were abandoned as well.
Of course they were. Why would you... One of the most important ports, and...
They decided it wasn't worth keeping.
I guess. Got other plans?
They clearly didn't care about it in the first place since they didn't defend it well anyways.
Didn't defend it well. Not one bit. Some crazy stuff. Stringham's tactic of keeping his ships in motion while bombarding forts was used later by Flag Officer Samuel Francis DuPont at Port Royal, South Carolina. The effectiveness of the practice led to a reconsideration of the value of fixed forts against naval gunnery.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what I don't understand. In the first couple battles that we had here, the boats would just come up there and they just be like, boom, 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 boom. Taking fire from forts, you know. These guys are like, how about we just keep on moving? Go in there, we shoot, roll around, reload, come back. Like a little...
Well, I guess it all depends on where you are, though. If you don't have a big body of water that you can't.
Right. No physical evidence of the battle remains. However, the battlefield is preserved with Cape Hatteras National Seashore. No physical evidence of the battle remains.
It's not even a fort?
Wow. All it is Cape Hatteras National Seashore. That's all it is. It's a seashore. Yeah, that's it. Probably right there.
See, I'm picturing a fort with, like, brick walls and shit. That's not even a fort.
No.
I guess it's a fort, but no walls or nothing. So
it wasn't like Sumter.
Right. And that leads us to our last battle of the day, the Battle of Dry Wood Creek, also known as the Battle of the Mules.
Okay.
Was fought on September 2nd, 1861 in Vernon County, Missouri. We got the Army of Missouri for the Confederates, manned by Sterling Price, which was the Missouri State Guard, which had 6,000 or 10,000 men, depending on who you ask. And over on the Union side, Brigadier General James H. Lane is commanding Lane's Kansas Brigade that had about 600 to 1,200 men. So significantly outmatched here.
Right.
Yeah, if you guys remember, Jackson was the governor of Missouri and he sucks. And he had to surrender his militia after Camp Jackson affair. After the debacle at Camp Jackson, Jackson formed a new organization named the Missouri State Guard, which we've been talking about, and appointed Sterling Price to command it.
Okay.
Nathaniel Lyon moved to confront Price's new force, defeating it at the Battle of Boonville, which we covered. Price and the Missouri State Guard retreated to the vicinity of Springfield in southwestern Missouri, where it was joined by Confederate States Army force commanded by Brigadier General Benjamin McCulloch.
Okay.
On August 10th, Lyon decided to attack the combined forces of Price and McCulloch while they were encamped along Wilson's Creek, which we covered last week. Despite being outnumbered by the Confederates and Missourians by a factor of over 2-1, the Battle of Wilson's Creek, the Union forces were defeated, and Nathaniel Lyon was killed.
Oh.
As you guys probably remember last week.
Remember. After Wilson's Creek, the Union Army retreated to Rolla, Missouri.
Yep.
McCulloch and his forces withdrew to Arkansas, and Price's Missouri State Guard occupied Springfield. John C. Fremont arrived to take control of Union forces in the state. James H. Lane took command of several Kansas regiments stationed at Fort Scott. Meanwhile, Price began to advance north with a force estimated number of 6,000 or 10,000. In response to Price's incursion, Fremont declared Missouri to be subject to, you guessed it, martial law.
Martial law.
So we got martial law in Mizzou.
In Mizzou, Lane sent his forces, estimated to number between 600 or 1,200 men, out to intercept Price's army and set an ambush along Drywood Creek in Vernon County, Missouri on September 2nd. The area around Drywood Creek was wooded, I would assume, giving Lane the element of surprise.
Okay.
The leading portions of the Missouri State Guard fell into Lane's trap. Price then brought up more troops, and the Missourians' numerical advantage was a deciding factor in the engagement.
Of course.
Lane's skirmishers were driven back from an advanced position, and the main Union force used the covers of the woods to hold off Price for about 2 hours.
Yeah. However, Price's men eventually overwhelmed the Kansans, and Lane's troops retreated to Fort Scott. During the retreat, Lane's men abandoned their supplies and mules to the Missouri State Guard. Price stated that an important factor in the victory was the fighting experience the Missouri State Guard had gained at Wilson's Creek. The capture of the mules led the battles to be sometimes known as the Battle of the Mules.
Hey, there you go.
The victory at Drywood Creek had allowed Price to be able to continue his northward expedition, and his army then headed to Johnson County, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we're just keep on going, guys.
All right, might as well.
A little bump in the road. Let's roll. We got a couple more mules.
Pack the mules up, baby.
Let's roll it.
In a report filed after the battle, Lane stated that his forces lost 5 men who were killed and 6 were wounded. In his post-action report, Price estimated his loss to be 2 men estimated. His loss, I mean, I don't know how many men.
1 or 2.
2 men killed and 23 wounded, although he noted that most of the wounds were not serious. After reaching Johnson County, Price continued to Lexington, Missouri, where a Union garrison was defending the town. Price's men surrounded the garrison, initiating the siege of Lexington. The Missouri State Guard subdued the Union garrison at one point using hemp bales as cover. Dang, they caught on fire and getting high at the same time while attacking uphill. After forcing Union garrison to surrender, the Missouri State Guard remained in Lexington area for 2 weeks before Price ordered the unit to return south.
Okay.
Today, the site of the battle is commemorated with a series of markers near Deerfield, Missouri. A museum in nearby Nevada, Missouri provides coverage of both the Battle of Drywood Creek and the American Civil War in Missouri as a whole.
Nice. So, this Confederate guy, Price, man, he's just marching on, and then he just wanted to get to Lexington. He's like, once we get to Lexington, we can go back, guys. And he did.
Wonder why. I guess we'll see when we get to the siege of Lexington, which will be next episode. Charleston, Kesslers Cross Lanes, Hatteras Inlet Batteries, and Drywood Creek this episode. Next episode's going to be the Battle of Carnifex Ferry, the Battle of Cheat Mountain, the Battle of Lexington, First Battle of Lexington, Missouri, action at Blue Mills Landing, and probably Battle of Barberville, at least.
Right.
It's pretty even.
So far?
Next week, the Union wins 2 of those battles. Confederates win 3. This week we had Union win 2 and Confederates win 2. So 2-2 so far this week. At the end of the year, I got some stats for everybody to see what battles were won and lost and all that good stuff. But that's coming up next week. We got a couple B battles though: Carnifex Ferry, Battle of Cheat Mountain,
all right,
and a Battle of Balls Bluff coming up later. But we're into September now. A couple more months till 1862, where the shit really picks up. Where all those Union victories. Where most of the right now you don't even have really none of the real famous.
No.
generals and people of the war coming in right now. It's like later on in the years.
They're still trying to figure out what this war is. They don't know yet.
Trying to get their strategic. I think once they're just trying to get their strategic stuff in place right now, so then they can actually put together. Because right now they don't. Neither of these guys have any real
No strategy.
Like the March on Washington or the what you call, you know what I'm talking about. Right. They have no battles lined out for themselves. They're just trying to take control of a bunch of stuff so they can outline an actual invasion to go somewhere. They haven't even invaded, and nobody's even invaded each other yet, really. They're just kind of fighting on the borderlines right there. Nobody's went north or south yet. So,
well, this is Lexington, Missouri.
And that's not even
right.
Missouri's not even a.
Missouri's not
a Confederate.
Missouri's like a Switzerland.
Well, supposedly, if you ask Jackson, he's gonna be like, no. So that's Charleston, Kesslers, Cross Lanes, Hatteras Inlet Batteries, and Drywood Creek. We got at least 4 more for you next week, and we're continuing this action. At least probably 3 to 4 each episode from here on out to close out 1861 until we get to some big battles.
We got a sheetload of big battles.
A lot of Class A and B battles in 1862.
I'm getting some moitas.
As a matter of fact, we have a total of 14 A battles, 15 A battles in 1862, which is 13 or 12 more than we had in all of 1861. So major battles coming up. Down the pipelines, people, we got a lot of stuff to cover still. Still got 4 more years of this war. Shit's just getting started. Because who's the overall commander of those fucking people so far?
Of who?
Who's the overall Union commander right now?
McCulloch, right?
Oh, that was the Confederate guy.
Oh, no. It's Meade or Sherman or something. Sherman, right? Somebody.
Meade don't take over until
for a while.
Gettysburg.
Right. Anybody right now?
Yeah. That's the Battles of the American Civil War episode for this week. If you guys are interested in American history of outlaws, criminals, law enforcement, that kind of stuff, we got another show going on over on the Creative Control Network called Outlaws and Gunslingers, where we cover the Wild West, Prohibition, gangs, criminals, bombers, hijackers, lawmen, all that good stuff in between. And that's every Tuesday that releases. So go check that out on the Creative Control Network. And we'll be back next week for another episode of Battles of the American Civil War. We are the Mouth of Michiganders with
Bang Dang.